Hello, and welcome to Catalyst Spills the Tea, where we break down and discuss trending topics in DEI. If you're new here, Catalyst is a global nonprofit that drives gender equity through workplace inclusion. Today, I'm your host, Josh Smalley Baldasare, Director of Content Creation, and I'm spilling the tea on microfeminism with my fellow Catalyst staffers, Sheila Brassel, Director of Research, and Alix Pollack, Head of Knowledge Transformation and Solution Development. So let's start with the obvious. What is microfeminism? Popularized on TikTok, microfeminisms are everyday actions women are employing to push back against day-to-day sexism in the workplace, one small act at a time. And I'd love to tag you in, Sheila, to kind of talk to us about why this is happening.
Thanks, Josh. Well, we know that for decades, if not longer, perhaps as long as women have been in the corporate workforce, that they have experienced these sorts of everyday slights at work. Little things like having their ideas get taken up by someone else, often by someone in a position of power or by a man, and having that person take credit for their ideas or their work. Or things like being spoken over or interrupted during meetings. So microfeminisms are raising awareness right now of the ways that everyday sexism continues to be a problem at work. But this is certainly tapping into a trend that has been around for quite some time.
Yeah, but in those everyday kind of death by a thousand cuts, subtle, not so subtle moments, right? Women are looking for ways that they can take back some of that control, that they can make positive impacts in their workplaces, even if they're not necessarily in a position of power. So I think it's just really a great example of the ways in which feminism doesn't need to be getting up on a soapbox or making broad sweeping changes. It can be in those small everyday actions to push back against the status quo.
Yeah, and I feel like that's why it's been so popular, right? Is that it's very accessible and that folks a lot of people have different roles, different personalities, and they may not feel like they can go out and march or protest, but these little things, and especially the everyday aspect, make them, I feel like, very accessible and also very powerful when all taken together.
I think it also helps women not to feel so alone, right? Because they can be in partnership in these kinds of actions. It's really validating to have other women, and hopefully people of all genders around you, picking up on those sort of behaviors and responding to them in kind, right? That it's kind of in locking arms in solidarity in small ways that can have a big ripple effect.
Yeah, Alix, it can help so much in those moments where you're maybe in fight or flight to have an idea of what you might do, but then also showcasing the diversity in these experiences, right? And how the ways that we're seeing everyday sexism and microfeminisms show up are intertwined with racism and microaggressions against women of color, and how this is the way that sexism shows up for women of color. And there's so much power, I think, in this, awareness giving that social media has provided.
Yeah. It's definitely one of my hopes coming out of this trend, is that it's an invitation into partnership for men and people of other genders as well, that feminism does not belong to women. It's about equity. And, the kinds of things that these microfeminist acts are pushing back against are the same kinds of problematic dynamics that people across genders are suffer from.
Yeah, I think that's definitely how I receive it as a cisgender man. I feel like it's an invitation for allies to, because all these things allies can also do, men can also do to support women. And I think, the point that you both brought up about the noticing and the intersectionality as well, the more men notice these things that these women are bringing awareness to, the more they can also interrupt them in the name of partnership.
I love hearing your perspective on this, as you said, as a cis man, what the invitation looks like for you. I also think that that's a place where we have an opportunity, maybe an obligation, to call out the potential challenges of this trend, which is that when it's an invitation, when it is these positive forms of microfeminism, it's a beautiful, accessible, inclusive thing. But it can also default to a place of shame and blame and sort of a zero sum. If women are going to quote unquote win, then someone has to be on the losing end of that, right? And it's kind of, rather than calling in, it's calling out men and saying in particular, you are bad or wrong for doing or saying the thing you just did. And that's not an invitation. That's not how we make progress. And it can be really alienating. And I think kind of gives the work we're trying to do around equity and inclusion and feminism a bit of more of an uphill battle to climb than we need.
I would love for us to talk a little bit about these sort of combative cultures and climates of silence that, breed these types of interactions that are hyper competitive, right? So if you are working in a hyper competitive environment, you might get more points if you do interrupt someone, if you do, take credit for someone else's work intentionally or unintentionally. So it's a lot of these sorts of cultural dynamics that we know can be shifted that set up these experiences of everyday sexism at work.
Yeah, I think, Sheila, what you're getting at too is the call to action for organizations and leadership in all of this, both to, if and when they notice acts of microfeminism happening in their workplaces, to lift that up, to validate and celebrate and replicate that, and also treat it as an opportunity for some self-reflection around why that microfeminist act was necessary in the first place.
Yeah, I'm really just coming back to that idea of death by 1,000 cuts, psychological safety. This is a workplace safety issue, women don't feel safe in the workplace. They feel like they have to use these small acts to get to that place of feeling like they're on an equal playing field. So I think that's a big call to, allies especially, and these workplaces to acknowledge that and to do what they can to put in safeguards. Well, I think we spilled the tea on microfeminism. So I just want to thank Alix and Sheila for this conversation. It's been very fruitful. And please join us next time on Catalyst Spills the Tea. Thanks all.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Alix.
Thank you.